He was born for chaos, Wade Wilson. From the very beginning, his life was marked by turbulence and disorder. Even as a child, there was something different about him, something that set him apart from the rest. He was drawn to the shadows, to the places where most people feared to tread. A name whispered in hushed tones. Wade Wilson, a name that would come to be known in the darkest corners of the world. His reputation preceded him, a shadow that loomed large over his every action. People spoke of him in whispers, afraid to say his name too loudly, as if invoking it might summon him from the darkness. From the beginning, he was different. There was a fire in his eyes, a burning intensity that set him apart. He was not like other children. While they played and laughed, he was drawn to the darker side of life. He was fascinated by the stories of war and conflict, by the tales of heroes and villains. He knew even then that he was destined for something more, a soldier of fortune, they called him, a man who would go anywhere, do anything for the right price. He was a mercenary, a gun for hire, but he was more than that. He was a force of nature, a storm that swept through the world, leaving chaos and destruction in his wake. A mercenary, skilled, deadly. He was a master of his craft, a man who had honed his skills to perfection. He could handle any weapon, navigate any terrain, and take down any target. He was a predator, always on the hunt, always ready to strike. His enemies feared him and his allies respected him. He was a man who commanded attention, who demanded respect. He thrived in the darkness. War was his playground. While others shied away from the horrors of battle, he embraced them. He found a strange kind of peace in the chaos, a sense of purpose in the violence. He was at home in the war-torn streets, in the places where death was a constant companion. He moved through the shadows like a ghost, always one step ahead of his enemies. Wade's early life was a blur of violence. From a young age, he was exposed to the harsh realities of the world. He saw things that no child should ever see, experienced things that no child should ever experience. The violence became a part of him, shaping him, molding him into the man he would become. It was all he knew, all he understood. He drifted from conflict to conflict. He was a wanderer, a nomad, always on the move. He traveled the world, seeking out the places where the fighting was fiercest, where the danger was greatest. He was drawn to the conflict, to the chaos. It was in these places that he felt most alive, most himself. A gun for hire, he never questioned his orders. He did what he was told, no questions asked. He was a professional, a man who took pride in his work. He didn't care about the politics, about the reasons behind the conflict. All that mattered to him was the job, the mission. He was a soldier, and he followed orders. He lived for the thrill of the fight. The adrenaline was his drug. He craved the rush, the excitement, the danger. He was addicted to the feeling of being on the edge, of living life at full throttle. The battlefield was his arena, the place where he felt most alive. He thrived on the chaos, on the uncertainty. It was what kept him going, what drove him forward. The adrenaline was his drug. It coursed through his veins, fueling him, driving him. He was always chasing the next high, the next rush. He lived for the moments of intense action, for the split-second decisions that could mean the difference between life and death. It was in these moments that he felt truly alive, truly himself. Death was his constant companion. He had seen it up close and personal more times than he could count. It was a part of his life, a part of who he was. He had learned to accept it, to live with it. He knew that it could come for him at any moment, that every day could be his last, but he didn't fear it. He embraced it, welcomed it. It was a part of the job, a part of the life he had chosen. He wasn't born a monster, he was made into one. The world had shaped him, had twisted him into something dark and dangerous. He had been a child once, innocent and full of hope, but that child was long gone, replaced by a man who had seen too much, who had done too much. The world had taken its toll on him, had left its mark, but the seeds were there, buried deep. Even as a child, there had been a darkness within him, a potential for violence. It had been nurtured, fed by the world around him. The seeds had taken root, had grown into something twisted and dangerous. He had become a product of his environment, a reflection of the world he lived in, waiting for the right moment to sprout. The darkness had always been there, lurking beneath the surface, waiting for its chance to emerge. It had been a slow process, a gradual transformation, but eventually it had taken over, had consumed him. He had become the monster that the world had made him. The world had a way of twisting even the strongest souls. It had a way of breaking people, of turning them into something they never wanted to be. Wade was no exception. He had been strong, had fought against the darkness, but in the end it had won. It had twisted him, had broken him. He had become a product of the world he lived in, a reflection of its darkness, and Wade's soul was about to be put through the grinder. He had faced many challenges, had overcome many obstacles, but the greatest test was yet to come. The world had more in store for him, more trials, more tribulations. His journey was far from over. The darkness was still there, still waiting, and it was about to take him to places he had never imagined. He just didn't know it yet. The future was uncertain, the path ahead shrouded in darkness. But one thing was clear. Wade Wilson's story was far from over. The world had more in store for him, more challenges, more battles, and he would face them head-on with the same intensity, the same determination that had defined his life. The darkness was waiting and Wade was ready. The job seemed simple, routine even, infiltration, extraction. It was supposed to be just another night, another mission. He had done this countless times before, slipping in and out of places unnoticed, leaving no trace behind. The thrill of the chase, the precision of the execution, it was all second nature to him. He was a master of his craft, a ghost in the shadows. He'd done it 1,000 times, each mission, a testament to his skill and expertise. He was the best at what he did, and he knew it. The adrenaline, the rush, it was addictive, but this time something felt off. There was an unease in the air, a sense of foreboding that he couldn't shake. But this time was different. This time, the stakes were higher. The target was not just another faceless name on a list. It was someone he knew, someone he trusted. The realization hit him like a ton of bricks. The betrayal was not just professional, it was personal. It cut deeper than any wound he had ever sustained. This time, the target was someone he knew, someone he trusted. The betrayal cut deep. It was a knife in the back, both literally and figuratively. The pain was excruciating, not just from the physical wound, but from the emotional devastation. His world, once so controlled and predictable, was now in chaos. A knife in the back, it shattered his world. Everything he believed in, everything he stood for was now in question. The trust he had placed in his comrades, the loyalty he had shown, it all seemed meaningless. The betrayal was a wound that would never fully heal, left him broken, scarred, both physically and emotionally. The recovery process was long and arduous. Each day was a battle, not just to heal his body, but to mend his shattered spirit. The scars, both visible and hidden, were a constant reminder of the betrayal. They were a testament to his pain, his suffering. The life he knew was gone. The man he once was no longer existed. In his place was a shell, a shadow of his former self. The sense of loss was overwhelming. He felt displaced, isolated, a stranger in his own skin. The world around him seemed bleak, devoid of meaning, replaced by a burning rage, a fire that consumed him from within. The anger was all-encompassing, leaving no room for anything else. It was a dark, seething rage that demanded retribution. The need for vengeance was a constant, gnawing presence in his mind, an insatiable thirst for revenge. It became his sole purpose, his driving force. The obsession took hold and he was consumed by it. Every waking moment was spent plotting, planning, preparing for the day he would exact his revenge. The determination was unwavering, the resolve unbreakable. He should have died that night. The attack was brutal, leaving him on the brink of death. The alleyway, once a place of shadows and secrets, became a battleground. The struggle was desperate, a fight for survival. He was left to bleed out, discarded like trash, left to rot in that alley. The sense of hopelessness was overwhelming. He was abandoned, forgotten, left to die. The evidence markers, the crime scene, it all seemed so surreal. The world moved on, indifferent to his suffering, but fate had other plans. He clung to life. The will to survive was strong, stronger than he ever realized. The hospital became his sanctuary, a place of healing and recovery. The medical equipment, the doctors, the nurses, they were his lifeline. Each day was a testament to his determination, his refusal to give up, his body broken but healing. The physical recovery was slow but steady. The scars, a reminder of his ordeal, began to fade, but the emotional turmoil was far from over. The sense of transformation was palpable. He was no longer the man he once was. He was changed, irrevocably. His mind, however, was irrevocably fractured. The darkness seeped in. whispering promises of power, of vengeance. The psychological trauma was profound. The whispers, the darkness, they became his constant companions. They fed his desire for revenge, his need for retribution. The power they promised was intoxicating, irresistible. He was no longer just a man. He was becoming something else, something darker, something more powerful. The making of a monster had begun. He remembered the face that had haunted him for years, etched into his memory like a scar that refused to heal. It was a face that had once been familiar, a face that had smiled and laughed with him. But now it was a face that represented betrayal, pain, and a deep-seated need for vengeance. The man who betrayed him haunted his dreams, fueled his nightmares. He became an obsession. Every night Wade would wake up in a cold sweat, the man's face looming over him, mocking him, reminding him of his failure. It was an obsession that consumed him, driving him to the brink of madness. He couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, couldn't think of anything else. The need for revenge was like a fire burning inside him, growing hotter and more intense with each passing day. The sole purpose of Wade's existence, to make him pay. Wade's life had become a single-minded pursuit of vengeance. He spent every waking moment tracking the man down, following every lead, no matter how small or insignificant. He became a ghost, slipping through the shadows, always one step behind his prey. The hunt was all that mattered. It was the only thing that gave his life meaning. He found him hiding, cowering, begging for mercy, but Wade felt none. Only a cold satisfaction. The moment he had been waiting for had finally arrived. The man was at his mercy, pleading for his life, but Wade's heart was as cold as ice. There was no room for pity, no place for compassion. The only thing he felt was a grim satisfaction, a sense of justice finally being served. He ended him swiftly, brutally. The act itself was over in a matter of seconds, but it felt like an eternity. Every movement was deliberate, every strike precise. Wade watched as the life drained from the man's eyes, and for a moment he felt a sense of peace. But it was fleeting, quickly replaced by a new kind of emptiness. The first kill is always the hardest. They say the first kill changes you, that it leaves a mark on your soul. Wade had always thought that was just a myth, a way to scare people into staying on the right side of the law. But now he knew it was true. He could feel the change inside him, a darkness that had taken root and was spreading like a poison. But for Wade it was a release from the torment that had plagued him for so long. The act of taking a life had given him a sense of control, a feeling of power that he had never known before. It was intoxicating, like a drug that he couldn't get enough of, a taste of something dark and intoxicating. The darkness was seductive, drawing him in deeper and deeper. He found himself craving it, needing it. The line between right and wrong, good and evil, had become blurred. He was no longer the man he once was. He had become something else, and something darker, something more dangerous. The line between sanity and madness blurred. He had crossed over, embraced the darkness. Wade had always prided himself on his self-control, his ability to stay calm and rational in even the most difficult situations, but now that control was slipping away. He could feel himself being pulled into the abyss, and he didn't have the strength to fight it. He didn't want to fight it. The darkness was a part of him now, and he welcomed it with open arms. He was no longer Wade Wilson. He was something else, something monstrous. The man who had once been Wade Wilson was gone, replaced by a creature of darkness and vengeance. He had become a monster, a predator stalking the night, always on the hunt for his next victim, and he reveled in it. The power, the fear, the bloodlust, it was all a part of him now, and he was just getting started. This was only the beginning. Wade knew that there would be more, that the darkness inside him would never be satisfied with just one kill. He had crossed a line, and there was no going back. The hunt would continue, and he would become more ruthless, more dangerous with each passing day. The world had better watch out, because Wade Wilson was on the loose and he was just getting started.